Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're pulling up, well, quite a stack of sources. They feel incredibly timely, but they also resonate with some really deep ancient wisdom.
hmm We're digging into a curated collection of thoughts, specifically gathered for June 4th.
Yeah, and it features insights from, timeless voices like Tolstoy and Emerson, but also alongside more contemporary thinkers like Ryan Holiday, Simon Sinek, Les Brown, and even some foundational scripture. It's quite a mix.
It really is, and
Wow.
it feels like a mix designed not just to sort of inform, but to really provoke thought about how we actually live.
Right.
Our mission in this deep dive, I think, is to really unpack these different perspectives, find the connective tissue between them, and, extract the core practical wisdom they offer you, the listener.
Yeah, this isn't just abstract philosophy we're talking about. It's really about understanding how to apply these ideas to navigate your own life with maybe more intention and, I think, crucially, more authenticity.
Exactly. We want to get past just reading words on a page and figure out how they translate into, well, into lived experience. How does this stuff actually work day to day?
And as we journey through these sources today, you'll quickly see a really powerful thread running through almost all of them. It's this fundamental distinction between how things appear on the surface and how they really are underneath. It's a consistent focus, isn't it, on the idea that our true selves, our genuine values, they're ultimately revealed not by what we say or, project outwardly,
Right.
but by our actions, what we actually do.
It's the age-old challenge, isn't it? Bridging that gap
Yeah.
between, our declared beliefs, what we say we stand for, and the reality of our daily conduct. What we do,
Right.
that becomes the sort of irrefutable evidence of who we are.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We should probably start right where the sources do, with what feels like the real foundational principle for this entire collection.
Sounds good. Where do we begin?
Well, right at the top, the sources ground us with a passage from Matthew 7.1620, which includes that incredibly potent line, "By their fruits ye shall know them."
Ah, yes. So concise.
It is almost stark in its simplicity, but it carries immense weight, doesn't it? This idea is clearly positioned as the bedrock, the foundation for all the subsequent wisdom we're going to look at.
Absolutely. It sets up this, well, this undeniable truth. You can craft any narrative you want about yourself, right? You can profess any set of values or beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
but the ultimate objective truth about your character, your integrity, your genuine orientation towards the world, it's all revealed by your actions and the tangible outcomes those actions produce, your fruits.
Yeah.
It's a universal principle, really. It transcends any specific time or context.
Yeah.
What you do is the verifiable data point. It's what people can actually see and experience.
And this idea immediately brings us face to face with a pretty challenging observation from Leo Tolstoy in his Calendar of Wisdom. He looks at what he perceives as the distortion, perversion, and false understanding of Christianity, and makes this rather startling claim, Escott, that it has led to lives that are actually worse than those of pagans. That's strong language.
It is provocative language.
Ah.
And it forces us to ask, well, what does he mean by distortion and false understanding?
Mm-hmm.
Tolstoy isn't necessarily attacking the core tenets of the faith itself, I don't think.
Okay.
It seems more like he's attacking the practice of it when it becomes disconnected from genuine internal transformation. He's pointing to religious or moral observance that's become purely external.
Like a performance.
Exactly. A performance, a ritual without soul, maybe a checklist of outward behaviors or declarations that aren't rooted in an interchange of heart or mind. It's like painting a house beautifully, but leaving the foundation completely crumbling inside.
So it's not just a lack of depth, it's more like an active departure from the intended spirit of the teaching itself. You're going through the motions, maybe even loudly proclaiming your virtue, but your actions, your fruits, are betraying something totally different, something actually contrary to the very principles you claim to uphold.
Precisely. And that's the profound danger, according to Tolstoy, and the source of why he says it's worse. This disconnect between claimed values and lived reality is, well, it's the definition of hypocrisy as these sources seem to present it.
Yeah.
When you adopt the appearance of virtue, of high moral or spiritual standards, but your actions are really driven by self-interest or judgment or other unexamined passions, you are not just failing to be virtuous.
Right.
You are actively corrupting the very concept of virtue itself. You're using the language and the guise of goodness to potentially manipulate, maybe to judge others from a false pedestal, and perhaps most damagingly, to lie to yourself.
Oof, that internal lie. That feels particularly corrosive, doesn't it? You build this whole facade, and it not only misleads other people, but it kind of isolates you from your own genuine truth, from the possibility of true self-knowledge and real growth.
Exactly. And that's why Tolstoy might say, it can be worse. Think about it. Someone who makes absolutely no claim to virtue might act purely out of pragmatism or immediate desire, right? And at least that's kind of an honest reflection of their internal state. There's no pretense involved.
Okay, I see that distinction.
But the hypocrite introduces deception. They wear a mask. And that mask doesn't just hide the self from others. It actually suffocates the possibility of the genuine self emerging the self that could potentially live according to those higher principles they talk about.
Wow.
It creates cynicism in observers, naturally. It undermines the very values being professed. And it locks the individual into this constant state of performance and anxiety, always worrying about the mask slipping. That internal performance is far more debilitating, arguably, than simply admitting a lack of adherence.
So the fruits, in this case, they're rotten, not just because they aren't good in themselves, but because they're being presented as something they're fundamentally not.
Precisely. It's the deception that makes it worse.
That framing makes the severity of his statement much, much clearer. It's not just about being a bad person in some simple sense. It's about the active harm caused by the pretense of being good while acting otherwise. It corrupts the individual, sure, but also the collective understanding of what those virtues even mean. So, by their fruits you shall know them isn't just a passive observation. It's actually a powerful tool for discernment and a really stark reminder of the accountability embedded in our actions.
It forces an honest assessment, doesn't it? Maybe not primarily of others, although that too, but definitely ourselves.
Yeah.
You have to ask, are my fruits actually matching the tree I claim to be?
Okay, so building directly on this idea of authenticity being revealed through action, these sources then transition into presenting what Tolstoy identifies as a really fundamental choice, a choice that shapes our entire orientation in life. It's framed in terms of whom, or perhaps what, we choose to serve.
Yes, he posits this stark dichotomy. It's quite black and white in his view. You are either a servant of your passions, or you are a servant of your inner divine spirit. There's no middle ground, no third option presented here.
Let's really unpack that first part. Being a servant of your passions, what does that look like in practice? I mean, beyond just fleeting desires for, say, chocolate or something.
Right, it's broader than that. In this context, serving your passions means being fundamentally guided by your impulses, yes, but also your cravings, your deep need for external validation, your fears, your pursuit of pleasure, your avoidance of pain.
Status, wealth.
Exactly. Status, wealth, power, anything that stems from the lower or, let's say, the external aspects of the self. If these are the primary drivers of your decisions and actions, Tolstoy argues, you inevitably become a servant of other human beings.
That connection feels a little counterintuitive at first glance. Why does serving my own passions make me a servant of other human beings? Shouldn't it make me my own master?
You'd think so, but think about where those passions often lead. So many of them are tied directly to the external world and other people's perceptions or resources. If your passion is for approval, for instance,
Okay.
you become a slave to what others think of you. You tailor your behavior, your opinions, maybe even your appearance, purely to gain their acceptance. Your actions are dictated by them.
I see.
Or if your passion is for wealth, you might become beholden to the systems, the employers, the customers who provide that wealth. You might find yourself compromising your integrity or your values just to acquire or maintain it. You're serving the demands of that system or those people.
Right, or chasing status.
Exactly. If your passion is for status, you're constantly competing with others, measuring yourself against them, desperately seeking their recognition. In each case, the source of your direction, your sense of worth, and ultimately your actions are coming from outside of you. They're dictated by the desires, expectations, judgments, or offerings of others.
So you're constantly trying to manage external forces just to satisfy some internal craving.
Precisely. You are, in effect, letting other people or external circumstances be your master. You're reacting, not leading from within.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture of one path. It's a life directed, really, from the outside in, driven by reaction and external input. What about the alternative, then? Serving your inner divine spirit.
So this is framed in the source as serving God alone. But again, I think you can understand this through a non-religious lens as well. It means serving your deepest internal wisdom, your core values, your conscience, your higher principles. that quiet, unwavering inner voice that, kind of knows right from wrong, truth from falsehood.
So it means your primary guidance comes from within.
Exactly. Your decisions are rooted in an internal moral compass, maybe a deep sense of purpose, a commitment to principles that you find intrinsically valuable, not dependent on external reward or punishment.
And that makes you a servant of God alone, or this inner spirit, because that deep well of wisdom isn't controlled by human masters or the whims of external circumstances. Is that the idea?
That's precisely the idea. Your ultimate allegiance, your primary reporting line, if you will, is to that internal truth, that higher principle within you. And this grants you a certain kind of freedom.
How so?
Well, you become less susceptible to being swayed by fleeting trends or manipulated by others' opinions or completely devastated by external setbacks. Your worth isn't determined by your bank account balance or your social media likes,
Right.
but by your adherence to your own internal standard. You have, as Tolstoy suggests, a superior master, one that resides within and provides steadfast, reliable guidance, independent of the external chaos.
This framing is incredibly powerful. It presents the core challenge of life not primarily as an external struggle against the world, but as an internal orientation. Which master are you actually allowing to dictate your choices, your reactions, your direction day to day? Is it the cacophony of external pressures and fleeting desires, or is it the quiet, consistent guidance of your deepest self?
It really forces a moment of introspection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have to look at your daily habits, your biggest decisions, and ask, what are they really serving? Who is pulling the strings here?
And this question leads us perfectly, I think, to the Abraham quote that's included here, which offers a perspective on the sort of external manifestation of this internal choice. The quote is, "Just find your alignment, and those who are also in alignment will recognize you."
Yes, beautiful quote.
So how does choosing to serve the inner spirit, finding that internal guidance, how does that connect to finding your alignment and then being recognized by others who are similarly aligned?
Well, when you choose to serve your inner divine spirit, when you actually listen to that internal compass and crucially act from that place, you are actively finding and living in alignment. It's happening naturally.
Okay.
You are aligning your external actions, your fruits, with your deepest internal values and truth. This is you expressing your genuine self, the self that is guided by your superior master, as Tolstoy put it, free from the constant need to perform for external validation.
And the recognition piece, that's not about seeking approval then. It sounds like something more organic is happening.
Precisely. It's not about putting out signals hoping someone approves. When you live authentically, guided from within, there's a kind of resonance to that. You aren't trying to contort yourself to fit into external molds or expectations. You are simply being your aligned self.
Mm-hmm.
The Abraham quote suggests that this state of genuine being naturally vibrates at a certain frequency, if you want to use that language, and that frequency is recognizable to others who are also living from a place of internal alignment. You attract people who value authenticity because you are authentic.
So you find your true connections, your community, not by chasing external trends or trying to please everyone,
Right.
but simply by being true to yourself.
Exactly. It's a radical shift in perspective, isn't it? Focus on internal congruence, on getting your inside and outside matched up, and the right external connections will follow naturally. You don't have to perform to belong. Your true self is actually the key to belonging with those who truly see and value you for who you are.
Wow, that completely flips the traditional model of seeking belonging by conforming, by trying to fit in, completely on its head. It suggests that genuine connection comes from, well, radical self-acceptance and self-guidance first.
Mm-hmm. Serve the internal master, align your actions with that guidance, and you essentially create a kind of magnetic field that attracts others living from a similar place of integrity. It's a powerful promise for living a life of true connection, built on shared values and authenticity, rather than just superficial common ground or shared circumstances.
It suggests that the deepest form of belonging is found not in changing who you are to fit in, but actually in having the courage to be who you are and then trusting that others who value that will find you. It really does start from within.
It has to.
Okay, so we've established that actions are the ultimate measure of authenticity by their fruits, and that our lives are shaped by this fundamental choice of serving external passions or the inner spirit. Now, this journey towards serving the inner spirit, towards finding that alignment, it feels like it requires a certain kind of intellectual and spiritual engagement, doesn't it? You can't just passively fall into it.
Absolutely not. It requires active participation. And that's where the sources bring in the vital role of independent thought.
Yes, and this is where Ralph Waldo Emerson's perspective becomes crucial. He says, The salvation of mankind depends upon independent thinkers directing their thoughts rightly.
Powerful statement.
It is. And that phrase, directing their thoughts rightly, that part feels so important. It's not just thinking differently for the sake of, being contrarian or rebellious just
Right.
because.
That's not just knee-jerk opposition.
No.
Yeah.
It's about actively, critically, and constructively guiding your own intellectual process towards truth, towards wisdom, towards progress. It implies direction and purpose.
Exactly. It requires you to take ownership of your own mind and your own understanding, to really wrestle with ideas, to question assumptions, especially your own, to build your own framework of understanding, rather than just passively inheriting one from your culture or your family or wherever. Emerson is essentially positing that the future of humanity, the advancement of society, hinges upon individuals cultivating the courage and the discipline to think for themselves. But, and this is key, to do so with a sense of purpose, aiming towards beneficial and truthful outcomes. It's about intellectual rigor married with some kind of ethical direction.
And this resonates so deeply with Tolstoy's call, which we see elsewhere in the sources, for making religions and maybe by extension, any system of belief or knowledge open.
Yes.
He states this is the only way every single human being in the world can reveal religious life and can discuss and create and discover religious truth.
That is such a powerful argument against rigid dogma and the blind acceptance of authority, isn't it? Tolstoy is advocating for a spiritual and intellectual life that is active, personal, and deeply participatory.
So open means what? Accessible, transparent.
Yes, accessible, transparent, and crucially, open to individual exploration, individual interpretation, open to dialogue, and even open to the co-creation of understanding. It's not about being handed a finished product of belief that you just have to swallow whole.
Right.
It's about an ongoing process of personal discovery, shared conversation, and collective searching for deeper truth. This really emphasizes personal experience, critical engagement, and community dialogue over just unquestioning adherence to inherited traditions or pronouncements from authority figures.
And this active questioning approach is explicitly linked to another really powerful point raised in the sources. The more respect that different objects, customs, or laws are given, the more attentively you have to question the right these things have to this respect.
Oh, that is a brilliant insight. So counterintuitive in some ways. We're often conditioned, aren't we, to grant respect based on age. It's always been done this way, or tradition, or authority, or just sheer popularity.
Yeah, everyone thinks that.
Right. But the source challenges us to apply heightened scrutiny, more attention, precisely to those things that are most revered. Why? Because the very demand for unquestioning respect can be a mechanism to shield outdated ideas, or unexamined assumptions, or entrenched power structures, or even actual injustices from critical analysis. Things that have been around forever or things that are held up by powerful institutions can easily become relics that no longer serve truth or well-being. But they continue to demand adherence simply out of inertia, or maybe fear of challenging the status quo.
So true wisdom isn't about blindly revering everything that's old or powerful or popular. It's about having the intellectual courage to ask the fundamental why. Why does this custom deserve my respect? Why does this law actually hold legitimate authority today? Does it still align with my understanding of truth and justice, an understanding arrived at through my own, rightly directed thought?
Exactly. It requires you to break free from passive acceptance. And that passive acceptance, as Tolstoy warned earlier, can lead to blindly following distorted or unexamined ways of living, the very perversions he identified.
Right.
This active questioning stance is fundamental to authentic living because it ensures that your beliefs, your values, your practices are genuinely yours. They've been forged in the crucible of your own inquiry and critical thought, not just inherited without reflection.
So it's how you build your internal alignment, that thing we were talking about, on a foundation of examined truth, not just borrowed dogma.
Precisely. It's about being a thinking agent in your own life and, by extension, in the world, taking responsibility for what you believe and why.
This idea of independent thought and questioning, it feels like a vital prerequisite for genuinely serving that inner spirit we discussed earlier. I mean, if your mind is just filled with unexamined assumptions and an unquestioned reverence for external norms, how can you possibly hear or trust that quiet inner guidance?
That's a great point. You have to clear away the external noise, the unquestioned clutter, to make space for the internal signal. You need to be able to discern the voice of genuine internal wisdom from the sort of internalized voices of external authority or tradition that we all carry around.
And that discernment requires the courage to question everything that demands respect without having earned your thoughtful assent. It's an ongoing process.
Constantly.
Okay, shifting gears just slightly, but staying connected to this theme of discerning what truly matters, the sources bring in Arthur Schopenhauer with a quote that, frankly, should make everyone pause and think. He says, "The greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness."
Yeah, that quote is like a cold splash of water, isn't it? Especially in a world that's often obsessed with external achievement.
Yeah.
In a culture that so often equates success and happiness with, financial gain, career advancement, material accumulation. Schopenhauer states, in no uncertain terms, that sacrificing your health, your fundamental state of physical and mental well-being for the pursuit of anything else, is the ultimate error, the biggest mistake you can make.
The height of irrationality, he implies. It forces a fundamental reevaluation of our priorities, doesn't it? We might think the greatest mistakes are, I don't know, financial ruin or public scandal or something dramatic like that.
Right.
But he's arguing that neglecting the very foundation of your capacity to experience life and pursue anything, that is the number one flaw. And think about how often people actually do this.
All the time.
Working, punishing hours, neglecting sleep consistently, eating poorly day after day, ignoring stress signals until they scream, skipping exercise, pushing through illness, all for the sake of maybe getting that promotion or hitting a financial target or acquiring more things.
And the deep irony is, the happiness they are pursuing through the sacrifice of health often becomes completely unattainable or at best fleeting, precisely because the physical and mental capacity to actually enjoy it has been eroded along the way.
Yeah.
You might accumulate the wealth, sure, but if you're burnt out, chronically anxious, or physically ill, what is the actual value of that wealth in terms of lived happiness, real well-being? It's a classic case of optimizing for the wrong variable entirely.
Health isn't just a form of happiness. Schopenhauer seems to say it's the enabler of almost all other forms of happiness and well-being. It's the platform.
It's the foundation, and this leads perfectly into the source's broader discussion about wealth itself being much more than just money.
Right. The source explicitly pushes back against that narrow definition, stating clearly wealth comes in forms other than money, which feels obvious, maybe, but we often don't live like it's true.
We don't. While financial health is acknowledged, providing for your family, working hard, spending wisely, saving judiciously, that's all important. The emphasis in these sources is deliberately placed on other equally crucial forms of wealth.
And the sources specifically highlight mental wealth. There's a line, "Our sanity, well-being, and happiness is required in order to be a great parent." And you could extend that, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Or a great partner, or a great employee, or a great friend, or a great creative, or frankly, just a functional, engaged human being.
And thinking of sanity and well-being as wealth, that feels different somehow than just thinking of it as a state we passively experience or hope for.
It absolutely reframes it. Wealth implies it's a valuable resource, right?
Yeah.
Something you possess, something you can cultivate, something you can invest in, and crucially, something that yields returns.
Okay.
Mental health isn't just the absence of illness. It's a positive state. It's resilience, clarity, emotional capacity, cognitive function, all things that allow you to engage effectively with life, to build meaningful relationships, to pursue your goals, and to actually experience joy. It's a form of capital, arguably the most important form.
Why the most important?
Because without it, accessing and utilizing other forms of wealth, including financial wealth, becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Good luck managing money well if you're crippled by anxiety or depression.
Good point. And physical health is given equal standing in the sources, with the explicit instruction that the same amount of attention paid to our financial health should be paid to our mental and physical health.
And this points directly back to intentionality and discipline, which we'll touch on more later. We understand intuitively, or at least we're told constantly, that building financial wealth requires conscious effort, budgeting, saving, investing, learning about finance. The sources argue compellingly that cultivating mental and physical well-being requires the same level of deliberate attention and consistent action. It's not about just hoping you stay well. It's about actively investing in your health through habits, choices, sometimes seeking professional help when needed.
It's recognizing that skipping sleep night after night or eating junk food constantly or neglecting stress, it isn't just getting by, it's actively depleting your most valuable resource. You're drawing down your core capital.
Exactly. You're spending your health capital without replenishing it.
So bringing this multifaceted view of wealth back to authentic living,
Right.
how does nurturing all these different forms of wealth tie into living a life of integrity, of alignment?
Well, authenticity, as we've been discussing, is about wholeness, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's about aligning your external actions with your internal state and your deepest values.
Yep.
So if your stated values include things like being present for your family, or contributing meaningfully to the world, or experiencing genuine fulfillment, but your actions consistently sacrifice your mental or physical health for, let's say, purely financial gain or external validation, you are creating a deep internal conflict, a
Uh-huh.
dissonance.
You're living out of alignment.
You're living a life that is, in essence, performative in a different way. You might be outwardly successful in one narrow domain, like finance, but you're neglecting the foundational elements that make a truly rich and aligned life possible. Sacrificing health for other pursuits is, in a way, sacrificing a more complete, more authentic human experience.
You're prioritizing a narrow, often external metric of happiness over the robust, holistic well-being that constitutes true wealth and enables genuine, sustainable fulfillment.
Exactly. It requires a kind of internal balance sheet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Recognizing that true richness, true wealth, comes from nurturing all these forms of wealth and understanding how deeply interdependent they are. You can't sustainably generate financial wealth if you burn out your mental or physical capital along the way.
And you certainly can't be present and effective in any role, parent, partner, leader, if your own well-being is crumbling underneath you.
And Simon Sinek's quote, included in the sources, reinforces this beautifully from a leadership perspective, but it applies broadly. The leaders who get the most out of their people are the leaders who care most about their people.
How does that connect?
Well, authentic leadership, much like authentic living, isn't solely focused on the output, the numbers, the external metrics of success. It's fundamentally about valuing and nurturing the state of being, the well-being, the potential, the resilience of oneself and of those one influences.
I see.
It recognizes that true, sustainable productivity and contribution actually flow from a state of well-being, not at the expense of it. It's a powerful reminder that caring for the human element, for the holistic health of yourself and others, isn't some soft skill. It's not optional. It's the bedrock of effective living and leading.
That perspective totally transforms the idea of what it means to be successful or productive. It shifts it from a purely transactional model, inputs and outputs, to one deeply rooted in fostering well-being as a primary form of capital. It connects our individual health choices directly to our capacity for authentic contribution and fulfillment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. Actions as the ultimate proof, the core choice between inner and outer masters, the necessity of independent critical thought, and redefining wealth to include holistic well-being. All of this points towards a life of authenticity and integrity. But living this way requires discipline, right? It requires consistent action, often in the face of resistance, internal or external.
Definitely. It's not the path of least resistance. And that's where Nelson Mandela provides such a powerful anchor point in these sources. His quote, "We must use time wisely and forever realize that the time is always ripe to do right."
That statement just cuts right through procrastination, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to acting on our values or our moral compass. We all fall into that trap sometimes thinking, oh, I'll stand up for that later, or I'll make that important change when things settle down, or I'll start living more aligned someday.
We wait for the perfect conditions, the right time.
Which, of course, never actually arrive, or rarely. Mandela, I mean, his entire life was a testament to acting on principle under the most imperfect and challenging conditions imaginable. He just cuts through all those excuses. He reminds us that integrity, living according to your principles, taking the action that aligns with doing right, these things are not conditional. They're demands of the present moment. The opportunity to act with integrity, to make the choice that aligns with your inner compass, is always available, regardless of external circumstances. The time to do right is now.
Always right.
Always ripe. Which brings us immediately to that incredibly sharp, almost uncomfortable, introspective question posed in the sources. Are you inventing things to do to avoid the important work?
Ouch. Yeah, that question holds up a mirror to our daily reality, doesn't it? In the context of everything we've discussed, aligning actions with values, serving the inner spirit, thinking independently, caring for your total well-being, what is the important work?
Right.
It is precisely these things, is the inner work of cultivating self-awareness and integrity,
Yeah.
and the outer work of living in alignment with those internal truths. It's the work of building a life of meaning and purpose guided from within, not just reacting to external demands.
And the source suggests, quite insightfully, I think, that busyness, ironically, can be the most sophisticated form of avoidance. We pack our schedules, we answer emails constantly, we attend endless meetings, we scroll through feeds, we check off trivial tasks.
And you feel productive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We get that sense of accomplishment, that feeling of being productive. But the question is, are we actually engaging with the tasks that truly matter for building a life of integrity, meaning, and genuine connection? Or are we just spinning our wheels on less important stuff?
It can absolutely be a defense mechanism. We can feel diligent and even exhausted by staying constantly busy, which then provides a convenient excuse to avoid the harder stuff.
Like what?
Like the more vulnerable, more meaningful work of, say, confronting our own internal misalignment or challenging our deep-seated assumptions, or actually prioritizing and nurturing our well-being when it feels inconvenient, or taking that difficult action that does right but might involve conflict or discomfort. Busyness can be a protective shield. It's a way to feel like you're moving forward while actually just standing still on the path towards your deepest values. It's often procrastination just masquerading as productivity.
There's also that quote included, play hard, play smart, play together. How might that fit into this theme of disciplined action and avoiding avoidance? It sounds more active.
Yeah, I see that as potentially offering a framework for how to engage with that important work once you've identified it. Play hard could suggest applying focused energy, real dedication, and intensity to the tasks that truly matter, giving them your full effort rather than just superficial, distracted attention.
Okay, full engagement.
Right. Play smart seems to speak to intentionality strategy and applying your independent, rightly directed thought, not just acting busy, but acting wisely and effectively towards your goals. That connects back to Emerson's point about directing thought rightly.
Makes sense. And play together.
Well, that could point towards the collaborative or community aspect of pursuing important work. Maybe it's building something meaningful with others or seeking support from others for your own journey of alignment, or perhaps engaging in collective action to do right in the world on a larger scale. It implies that disciplined effort can be focused, hard, intelligent, smart, and potentially collective together in the pursuit of living authentically and doing what actually matters.
So it's taking the idea of intentional application like we discussed with investing in health and wealth and applying it to the broader canvas of how we spend our time and energy in pursuit, alignment, and right action.
Exactly. It's not just about being busy. It's about being purposefully and effectively engaged in the right things. And finally, Les Brown's perspective offers a really crucial frame, I think, for navigating the inevitable challenges and setbacks on this path. He says, there are winners, there are losers, and there are people who have not yet learned how to win.
Right, because living authentically and doing the important work, it's definitely not a smooth, linear path. We will inevitably stumble, fall short, experience moments where our actions don't fully align with our highest values or intentions. It happens.
Of course it does. We're human. And instead of labeling ourselves or others as permanent losers when we inevitably fall short, Brown offers this perspective of growth and learning. Setbacks, failures, those moments of hypocrisy or misalignment we all experience, they aren't necessarily definitive endpoints.
They're data points.
Exactly. They can be reframed as temporary states, as stages in a larger learning process. You haven't failed permanently. You're simply perhaps in the process of learning how to win, learning how to more consistently live in alignment, learning how to take the right action more effectively, learning how to overcome the internal resistances and the external distractions. It really emphasizes perseverance, resilience, and the ongoing nature of disciplined, authentic living.
So it's a process of continuous refinement, maybe, not a static test you either pass or fail once and for all.
Precisely. The pursuit of authenticity, of living aligned with our inner spirit and values, isn't about reaching some perfect static state, but about viewing it as a continuous journey of learning, striving, course-correcting, and persistently seeking to bring our actions, our fruits, into line with our truest selves.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And every misstep is actually an opportunity to learn how to win, as Les Brown puts it, more effectively next time. How to get back into alignment faster.
Okay, wow. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive today. We've drawn threads from, foundational scripture and ancient wisdom right through to modern thinkers on leadership and personal growth.
We really have.
From that foundational principle that our actions are the ultimate truth tellers, the fruits to the core choice we all face, allowing ourselves to be guided primarily by external pressures and passions or by our internal wisdom and spirit.
And the absolute necessity of independent critical thought directed rightly to build our own authentic understanding, rather than just accepting things passively.
And that expanded definition of wealth, pushing beyond just money to embrace our total well-being, mental and physical, as foundational capital.
Right. And finally, the discipline required to take right action now, as Mandela urged, and to avoid the seductive trap of performative busyness that keeps us from the truly important work.
Yeah, weaving these different passages together really does create a rich and I think quite comprehensive tapestry of what living an authentic life truly entails. It moves way past superficial definitions, doesn't it?
It does. It points us towards an internal congruence, an inner alignment that is then made visible and real through our consistent actions in the world. It's clear from these sources, it's not about maintaining some perfect outward image,
No.
but about the continuous, sometimes difficult work of cultivating a genuine state of being from the inside out.
It's not about chasing those external markers of success or constantly seeking approval from others. It's really about the challenging, probably lifelong process of aligning what you do with what you believe at your deepest level.
And questioning assumptions along the way.
Yes, questioning assumptions, valuing your holistic health as your primary capital, and choosing integrity over convenience, moment by moment by moment.
It is about constantly striving, I think, to ensure that the fruits you bear are a true and honest reflection of the tree you are consciously cultivating within yourself.
So this deep dive into these varied sources, it feels like it's provided a really powerful framework, almost a kind of operating manual for understanding what it really means to live authentically. It definitely moves the focus from just the external perception, how we appear to others, to our internal reality, who we are at our core, and then crucially back out again to emphasize that our actions are the non-negotiable proof of that internal state.
Yeah, it holds us accountable, doesn't it? Primarily to ourselves.
Yeah.
It challenges us to constantly try and bridge that gap between who we aspire to be, the values we profess, and who we are actually revealing ourselves to be through our daily actions and choices.
So, for you, listening to this deep dive right now, if authenticity is ultimately revealed by your actions, by your fruits, and if the time is, as Mandela said, always right to do right, what is one small action you could take today? Just today. Something based on these insights that would bring your fruits just a little more in line with the values you aspire to live by. Maybe something that feels like serving your inner spirit rather than external pressure. Something that feels like engaging in that important work you might have been, subtly avoiding. Just one small, deliberate action today. What could that be for you?